they are in for a f***ing surprise the first time that grid goes down and their lights go out.
Well, I did read the book, and so it's called the Battery Powered Home, right? You know, someone who's been in the industry going on like 8 years. I think it's an important read. I just out of curiosity, Greg, like what was the inspiration of writing this book?
Yeah, Ben, thank you. That is a great question. I started writing this toward the end of 2020 when the world was in full lockdown from the COVID craziness. And I was actually writing a different book. I was actually writing a book of all my Navy Sea stories. Yeah. And a buddy of mine called me with an SMA Sunny Island question. And I just, that is my favorite hybrid inverter. It's the most over-engineered thing on the planet, right? Not to plug any manufacturer, but I just got to know that inverter very well when I worked for SMA. And he had a question. He said, I know you're not working with them anymore, but would you know why this behavior is happening? And so I told him, he said, dude, how do you remember all that shit, man? You haven't been at SMA in forever. And so he said, you should write all this stuff down. So you know what? That's not a bad idea. And so I went back and took all my old LinkedIn posts and blog entries. And that was kind of what started this book. And it just kept progressing. And at some point, I was like, all right, well, like I got to make this look more professional. So I got a publisher and an editor, and we went through the whole thing. It took about a year, but I launched it.
I think what I got from this book, though, I think a big important thing, and maybe this is kind of one of the motivations why you wrote it, was like just the expectations of batteries and how that's just not been a good. There's in the solar industry, I feel like, you know, with looking at turnkey and, you know, the sales organizations and how they kind of pitch batteries to homeowners has been a little bit, I don't know, maybe misleading. Maybe that's not the right word, but I think expectations are not properly set. And maybe because there's a little bit of how the commission structure is set up for these turnkey organizations. And maybe, I know Jeff, you could probably talk on to that because you deal with that a lot. And before you answer that question, Jeff, why don't you kind of tell us your background?
So Greg and I started working in the PV industry around the same time. In fact, one of the first trainings that I had ever organized, Greg was one of the speakers, and he impressed me as being no nonsense, very clear and easy to understand. He came in from a unique background, having worked in the Navy with large energy systems and battery systems. And I was very impressed, quite honestly, not only with his technical knowledge, but also his ability to tell it like it is and like it should be. And just like his shirt says, RTFM, I think Greg has been one of the more vocal proponents in the entire industry over the years of people being conscientious of the realities of this technology and how it actually works. Unfortunately, too many folks in our industry, whether they're contractors and installers or folks that are doing their own work, fail to appreciate the functional limitations of any of the technologies that we deal with. And I think Greg has probably, again, been one of the strongest voices in the industry for people to understand the realities and limitations, but also the capabilities and benefits of this technology. So I'm pleased to say that I have my own autographed copy of Greg's book right here. And he does give a nice plug to the documentary film that I helped make about how the solar industry started. And I also have been a very strong vocal proponent of people understanding the benefits of this technology, but also the realistic limitations. Those people that say, I want to live off grid, more often than not fail to comprehend the sacrifices they may end up having, sometimes making, by living off grid. And I feel that Greg does an excellent job of giving a reality check to people with his book. And I feel that in the work that he's doing and helping train people in the industry, he helps bring people back to a realistic level so we can take what is a wonderful technology, has tremendous benefits, and apply it properly.
And kind of circling back to like setting expectations, that question of like who this book is for and what they can get out of it. I mean, you go into some other topics that I kind of was like, ooh, that's interesting. That gets a little outside of a battery conversation, more string versus micro, which I like to discuss at the end. But setting expectations, why don't you tell us what you've been experiencing before you wrote this book, and why you felt like you had to kind of lay it all out for people?
Yeah, man, that's another great question. As Jeff said, we came into the industry about the same time. I started with SMA in May of 2008 as a technical trainer. And previous to that, I was also a master training specialist in the Navy. So we knew how to train all levels of people, right? All in pertaining to this industry, I've had to be able to talk to utility engineers all the way down to the very, very green installer that doesn't even know what PV stands for. And that's a challenge. And it's a challenge to not only teach people that, but to also write a book about it. But the job, for me, I took my job as a technical trainer to mean that I was in charge of reducing service calls. I actively trained the service people of all the companies that I work for, and I used my material to train the industry and end users about the technology so that they won't have to call the company for service. And so that was kind of the reason why I started this. But then it expanded out. And after I had a few people in the industry proof my book, one of them was Justine Sanchez, and another, an SEI sister, she and I go way back. And she proofed the book, and she says, you kind of pitched this for the industry, but there's a lot of good nuggets in there for end users. And so in the very back cover, I work with my editor to massage the book description and kind of who the book is for. And I really lay it out in the very first chapter of the book. And coincidentally, the story that I tell in that book actually happened. Like, I never name names. I never have throughout the industry, things that go wrong. I never name names. I may show pictures, but I don't tell who they are. And the story that I tell in that book really happened. And it all went back to customer expectation management and what the installer did not tell these people.
Why don't you tell that story? Give us a quick version of that story.
Yeah, Reader's Digest condensed version, if that's even a relatable example anymore, right? So we had a customer, lived in Northern California, that bought a 20 kilowatt hour system. And PG&E during that time was shutting down the entire parts of the grid if the winds got above 35 miles an hour, because their infrastructure was bad. The utility itself was causing fires. Yeah? So to minimize that, they would just shut the grid down, and they may have given you notice when they did that. And so these homeowners got a brand new system. They wanted to show it off. And when the grid went down, for a 3-day outage is what PG&E said it was going to be, they decided to have a hot tub party on the second day. And they drained the battery down, and there's a lot of technical details about that. But the outage ended up being longer than a week. And so they were mad at us. And they were like, you are replacing all the food in my freezers and my refrigerator. And it's like, well, no, we're not. But let's get your system back up and running and help figure it out.
Yeah, I would say, just to add to that, unfortunately, misunderstanding of battery systems, particularly today, is rampant. And I feel that a lot of folks that have installed batteries in the past 2 or 3 years will likely, unfortunately, discover in an unpleasant way the limitations of that battery system because the person that sold it to them failed to establish realistic expectations. The interesting thing is that these are highly avoidable problems. Most customers wouldn't have any qualms if they were to learn in advance the do's and don'ts. And I think that Greg, in my opinion, has been one of the most effective individuals in the industry in teaching contractors how to understand the limitations and encouraging them to communicating those limitations and establishing realistic expectations for the consumer so there are fewer angry end customers. So I expect that when a lot of folks have their first power outage, they're going to probably walk away from that saying, this salesman said I could do this and I couldn't do that. And it's unfortunate because it sours them on the technology when it ought not. I think that if they had come into it with both eyes wide open, I don't think it would have changed their buying decision. It just would have changed their behavior pattern when that incident occurred.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of homeowners have the aha moment. Like Jeff, you're alluding to, of load management is what it comes down to, right? And every homeowner has the aha moment. You just want them to have it before all the lights go out in their house and they drain the battery down.
I have to mention something, Ben, because in my early years of training, I had a really experienced solar contractor who gave an analogy. He said, my grid tie customers, I meet them, I install their solar system. It takes about a week and I never talk to them again. But my battery customers, I have on speed dial. And the point is that when an unhappy battery customer becomes unhappy, they will track that contractor down and translate their unhappiness in a very distinctive manner to that contractor, and most of that is entirely avoidable.
Yeah. Well, I think there's multiple layers to the reason why misconception is probably pretty rampant when we look at battery installations. One, the cost of batteries are so expensive. And so I do think when you look at a sales organization who has a certain culture about selling, I don't want to use car dealership as an example, but there is definitely a lot of that kind of culture in the sales. Unfortunately, in the turnkey, I think that's why Go Green and Unbound and Alt E have done so well, because they cater to the people who don't want to deal with that type of experience, and they're catering to people who have the ability to kind of figure it out on their own. And not only do they just not have to go into that, they know they're getting the transparency through the buying process. But then also the level of integrity that these companies have when setting expectations is there. So, I think when someone who's been in sales for turnkey, there's a lot of we call it honeymooning the customer. I did have some really good mentors that says, don't honeymoon the customer, right? Set expectations. You'll build a stronger relationship and rapport with them. So I think it's just a lot has to do with fear of losing the sale for a lot of these sales guys who are working 100% on commission, and I think that's a huge problem in the industry too. Not even just grid tie alone. When you're working 100% commission, you have a bad month, you start maybe bending the truth a little bit.
But sometimes it's good to lose the sale. Sometimes you should lose that sale because that might not be the right sale to have, and you can move on to sales that are the right ones. I feel that concept of, every sale is equally important is a huge mistake for a salesperson.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I know nobody wants to turn down a sale. I get a little bit into this in my book, and I get it, right? Especially now, times are tough, things are lean. Sales organizations are really, struggling to sell stuff, right? But the average truck roll in the US is about $400. And so what that means is anytime you have an issue and the installer has to send a truck out to the site to troubleshoot, diagnose, that's $400 out of their pocket. And what I tell people, as soon as you add batteries, and boy, as soon as you get into off-grid applications, you are married to those people. And so is that $400 truck roll or multiple truck rolls worth that margin from that sale? That's a question that every organization should be asking themselves once they get into batteries. I'll tell you, bouncing off something that you both have said, and by the way, if you're not familiar with RTFM, it means read the fun manual. And I'll tell you, the DIYers, in my experience, are more likely to read the documentation than the installers.
I do have an interesting question for Greg. And obviously in just probably the last 2 years, we've seen a dramatic shift towards utility rates where the afternoon hours for electricity in California have gotten ridiculously expensive. San Diego Gas and Electric now has a rate tier in the 70 some odd cent a kilowatt hour in the afternoon in summer. It won't be long before we're looking at $1 a kilowatt hour for electricity in some of these California utilities. So a lot of companies have been promoting these batteries that don't provide any backup capability. All they do is that shifting where in the afternoon hours you live off the battery, but when the grid goes down, you can't use your battery. And this causes me concern because I think that the significant majority of customers that buy that type of system, which is a little less expensive than one that can do backup when the grid's down, are really surprised and tremendously disappointed to learn that when the grid goes down for a day or two, that solar system and that battery are just sitting there looking pretty, doing nothing of value. And I'm just wondering, Greg, I'm sure you've been hearing rumblings from some folks that are discovering that that less expensive battery system they bought won't work in a grid outage. Maybe you can speak to that.
I absolutely can, because the company I work for now, our salespeople were promoting that. And basically the idea is if your grid doesn't go down all that much and you don't really need backup, then you don't have to buy an automatic transfer switch. So you save a couple $1,000s, but you buy the PV, the inverter, and the battery, and you're only going to use it in a time of use setting. In other words, you're going to fill the battery up with solar, and you're only going to discharge it between these hours in the afternoon, like you said, Jeff, to offset your consumption. But the people installing these systems, and when I found out about this, it was because a service guy called me and said, Greg, have you ever heard of a battery system going in that didn't have backup and that didn't have an ATS? I was like, no. Where did you get that from? And come to find out, it's not through any fault of the manufacturer. It is the salespeople that are selling that, right? So if the installation company does not express that severe limitation to that energy storage system to the homeowner, they are in for a f***ing surprise the first time that grid goes down and their lights go out along with the homeowner, and they have no food, no way to charge their phone, no way to stay connected to the world when the Duke hits the fan, because they had this preconceived notion that they were going to have all that because they had this battery in the garage. And I despise that application wholeheartedly. I cannot express my disdain for that application. I think it's a stupid thing to do. You'll get much more bang for your buck by just giving that extra little bit of energy security.
It seems silly to me to save $2,000 and not take advantage of having your solar and battery when the grid goes down. I recognize that's not a common thing. Like where I live in Chandler, Arizona, we've got an incredibly stable grid. I would say, though, if I were to put a battery on, I can assure you I would add the extra couple $1,000s to allow me to use it if the grid were to go down for an extended period of time. It's just too compelling a use case to ignore.
I think it's like because I worked for a company that offered that in California when the NEM 3.0 kicked in. Hey, we have this other tier. Obviously, they're promoting you want to sell it right, encouraging people to get the full backup. But if they were really just trying to save money and trying to leverage like the old school grid tie only experience without the backup solution, you can use batteries to store it on the premise. But yeah, it's like $2,000 for the controller, but then you're also looking at labor, because there is more wiring, sub panel. And I think it was looking like between like somewhere like $35,000 to $5,000 more after all said and done. So it was like about a $4,000, I think, on average difference in cost when you factor in labor. For turnkey, not the case, right? I mean, I'm sorry, for DIY, not the case, because you're finding ways to kind of work around the labor expenses. And
as long as the homeowner, as long as the end user understands that application, hey man, you sell whatever you need to sell to stay in business. Like, I get it, but companies are not doing that.
I'll just say this. The first time those people that elect to save the $3,500 or the $4,000 or the $5,000 to not get that microgrid interconnection device that allows you to have grid power, allows you to have battery power in a grid outage, the first time that power goes out, even though the individual, let's say it's a husband and wife, and maybe the husband said, oh, we don't really need that off-grid capability or that grid backup capability. As soon as the power goes out, I bet you everybody in that household who wasn't part of that decision will say, wait, we've got a battery, we've got solar, why don't we have power? And I bet you they regret not spending that extra money, because the reality is the grid in this country, as the years go by, is becoming less and less reliable. Grid outages are becoming more plentiful. Weather events are driving these kind of situations more frequently than they were. The grid's getting old and decrepit. So the fact is that extra $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000 is absolutely worth spending for 90% of these people that don't get the microgrid interconnection device to save a little money.
I think the other two is like, oh, well, the battery's only going to be warranty for 10 years, or the replacement fact. Well, it's like, yeah, you replace the battery. They're going to be much cheaper in 10 years, much cheaper in 10 years. Who knows where the chemistry is going to change too. I mean, a lot of things are evolving.
A good battery will last a hell of a lot longer than 10 years too.
Yeah. Well, that was a question I was going to bring up next too, but like, more likely to last longer than 10 years, but the warranties, right, just kind of gives people a rough idea. And then, you have all the wiring and the systems in place to just swap that battery out more or less, depending on how you're putting it together. So it's not like that money is like, well, when you get another battery, it's like that additional cost. It's like, that's just part of the wiring that will be always there. And it's like an investment. On top of that, like, you're going to get the 30% federal tax credit on that $4,000 average cost. So it's really not $4,000 when you factor in that too. A lot of people don't look at that factor either. So it's like you're making an investment in the house. When you go to sell it, you got to disclose like, hey, this is backup or not backup. You're going to get that money back anyway when you sell the house with having that. I think having that extra feature with the battery backup. So it's like, it's not like you're throwing money away. It's just like you're just temporarily putting it into a savings account. And when you sell the house, you'll get that money back because you made the smart decision to invest in having the backup battery wiring and the controller in there. And it's like, you really got to look at it from a holistic view. And I think from an advisor helping someone make that decision, they just got to give them all that context. And I think it's a no-brainer, like you guys are mentioning.
I never understood, and I rail about this in my book and when I'm talking to people in general about storage. I don't understand why our industry is exempt from all the other things in the world that people do. Like, for example, the big sales organizations convince people that if a solar system and battery could not pay for itself in 5 to 7 years, then it had no value, right? That was the mantra. And that's what they pushed. Oh man, 5, 7 years, and then it's all gravy for the next 20. It's like, dude, the warranty on my car was 7 years, 70,000 miles. I don't get a new car when either one of those two values trips over. So why would you expect to sell a battery system just because it reaches the warranty period, right? And so that was the NEM 3 stigma that really caused California to freak out, because all those sales organizations that pushed dollar per watt, 5 to 7 year ROI, like that was the only freaking thing that mattered. As soon as NEM 3 crept up, and instead of getting 25 cents a kilowatt hour, we were getting less than 1 cent a kilowatt hour for some parts of the year, they freaked out. They fled California. They hauled ass out of a state where you're getting billed 55 cents a kilowatt hour. And they went to Nevada where energy was 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Like that does not make sense to me. There was still so much value for solar and storage here, but because of the way that they pushed that application on people, they shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, there's this whole crop of salespeople we refer to in our industry as the solar bros, and these solar bros are chasing the fast, easy money, so that before the problems mount with the customers they've misinformed, they've already closed that business down and moved on to the next business. The one thing I do want to say, though, is there are competent, quality professionals in this industry also, but it's up to you, the consumer, to make that determination as to who's competent and who's not. And just because there's a good looking fella who's got this really nice cologne on and is well groomed and speaks cleanly, that those people, I tend to already be a little suspicious of that right out the gate. So you have to, as the consumer, educate yourself enough. And I think reading Greg's book is a great way to start that process. You have to educate yourself so that you don't get ripped off. And it's your responsibility to protect yourself. So when something goes wrong, don't blame Greg, don't blame me, don't blame Ben. Blame yourself for failing to do adequate research to find a competent company to buy your equipment from or to do your installation.
Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, if you read my book as an end user, you will know more than those goobers that come knocking on your door to sell you solar and storage. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the commission structure being in that side for a while, turnkey, like depending on what company you work for, it's a lot. I think it's anywhere from $50 to $1.20 a watt for commission. So these guys are making anywhere from $6,500 to over $10,000 a sale, and that's, they only need to sell 2 or 3, but it's like, the problem with that is that it really does breed a certain type of personality. Like you said, looking for that quick win, not willing to maybe do the right things to make sure that they are able to get fed that month. And, I think the companies that kind of subsidize that with more of a salary base and maybe a small commission, but nothing near to that, like that is just grotesque. In my opinion, I think it just is always going to attract, those types of people always, right?
Here's a question for the consumer. Ask the salesperson what their commission is.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally serious. How much money will you make off my sale? And I state that only half jokingly, because we are seeing massive abuses by sales organizations where these salespeople know nothing about the technology whatsoever. They're in it for the quick sale. And if they weren't selling solar, they'd be selling windows. And anybody that's ever made the mistake of inquiring about the price of a window probably regrets it to their dying grave, because you will get harangued by the least professional elements of the contracting world. So be wary of a solar salesperson. Make certain they're legitimate. And there are some resources to do that. But I'd say if you read a book like Greg's, you're going to be in a much better position to validate if that salesperson has a clue what they're talking about.
No, I agree. I think a lot of, so we get a lot of customers who've like, yeah, I've gotten some turnkey quotes. I know what I want, because they're kind of all saying the same thing. I'm like, honestly, that's not good enough for us. We have a policy, like we need your usage behavior. Like we need either something from your online portal, or maybe your bill has a yearly graph, because even though they might be kind of in the same ballpark, you get 1 or 2 quotes. I mean, these guys are all doing the same thing. They're not, I'm not going to discredit all turnkey and all salespeople. I don't want to go out there saying that they're all bad, but I do say, like, more often than not, maybe at least 50%, maybe a slight more, are probably not being completely 100% transparent with you. And so I would say that's great that you got those quotes and designs, but we're going to do it from scratch, because, we are experienced enough to know that if we just go based off what you think you need because some other solar company told you that, a year from now, you're going to not be happy with your production. So we do our due diligence too here at Gigawatt. And so it's important, I think, to, you got to get the foundation. It's like, what do you use? Where do you live in the hemisphere? What is the weather patterns like in your area on average? And, we have software that does that. A lot of other companies have similar software, but the problem is you got the salesperson in there like, I'm going to take a couple panels off because, that's going to make the monthly price look better, or I'm going to use a lower interest rate. Here's the thing that I don't know if you guys are very aware of, but when you look at these solar financings for 25 years, there is a huge dealer fee. A dealer fee is a fee that that the banks or the middleman put in on there to basically buy down the interest rate. So you're getting like a 2.99 or 199, but you're actually paying an additional 30 to 40% of the cost on a cash deal system. But your monthly payments look great, but you're spending so much more. So if you plan on paying this off in maybe 5 years instead of 25 years, you're still paying like an additional huge amount of money, where if you would have known that, you might have gotten a higher interest rate, gotten a very low dealer fee. And if you do pay it off earlier, you would actually save a ton of money. So that is not being disclosed at all. And there's a lot of lawsuits coming down on some of these financial institutions that are supporting that type of behavior. And so, I mean, I know they got a little sidetracked there, but I think a lot of people have to understand the financing stuff is not as good as it looks. And always ask for cash price if you really want to understand how much more they're charging you.
No, that's good stuff, Ben. Like, that's great advocacy for the end user, because I'm in the industry. So, just like you guys, when I'm browsing the internet for whatever, I always get those pop-ups, a thing on the side. Oh, hey, you live in California. Hey, 0 money down. We'll pay to get you your solar system. Like, I don't even want to know what the dealer fee is for that. But to your other point, like, there are some legitimate people. And I just kind of look like I had a couple of kids come to my door 2 days ago, just door knockers. And I answered a couple questions and they kind of knew what they were talking about. But one thing they said that struck me is like, well, like, you're getting ready to sell me a battery system, but you haven't even asked me what my loads are. And the guy, and whether this is true or not, he said, oh, we're just here like to get our foot in the door and to get you talking. Because what he asked me was, what's your monthly bill? And I said, I'm just like messing with him all the time. So I don't know. Well, what's the square
footage of your house?
I said, what is the square footage? What does that have to do with anything? Right. And so I was getting ready to just slam the door in his face. But he said, well, we're just trying to gather this information. But it does go to one of our designers who does massage this information, who does ask you these follow-up questions. Like, okay, like I'll accept that if it's true. I just don't know how many of those organizations really follow up with that.
I'll just say right out the gate that whenever I talk with friends or friends of friends about their interest in getting solar and storage, or prospective customers, the first thing I say is, what is your objective? What are you trying to achieve? And I feel that if a salesperson doesn't take an interest in what your lifestyle is, what you're trying to accomplish, what your kilowatt hour consumption is, what you're hoping to achieve with a battery system, if they don't ask those questions, that's a huge red flag in my opinion.
Regulating the industry, I think there needs to be some form of that to some degree, because I do feel like these companies are running rampant. And I see it not just with the customers, but how they treat their sales forces too. Like there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? I guess,
unethical behavior,
both to like the workers in this industry. They take advantage of young kids who are looking to get a head start, and they're kind of sold on this idea that they can make good money. And then before you know it, they don't get paid until after install. So now they have like 5 or 10 deals waiting to get installed. So now they got about $20,000 to $30,000 of commission hanging over their head. They're not liking it, and it's very hard for them to get out. And these owners across the country are taking advantage of that and totally exploiting these kids. It's really gross. And then on top of that, it kind of puts them in this weird position where they can't always be honest to the end user. So I think there's just this really toxic behavior there. Now, it's not everybody. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I have noticed it quite a bit. We are starting to see the industry kind of shift, with the market changing kind of on a downturn. We're starting to see these companies that aren't well established, that use good practices, start to fall to the wayside, right? So it's like almost in a way self-regulating. But unfortunately for a lot of homeowners that bought into it, now they don't have someone to support them, right? Because that company's out of business. They buy some extended warranty. And that's unfortunate because they're still paying on like a 25-year loan that's supposed to replace their power bill. But now they have two bills. They have a solar system that may or may not be working properly, no one to take care of it for them. And then they got the escalating rates of the utility. So I think a DIY approach is cool because it forces you to understand your system more intimately than if you were to do a turnkey. And that way you can come back and make the adjustments and fixes if you need to, because you educate yourself in the process, right?
Yeah, dude, if you want to make some money in this industry, and if you have the temperament for it, start an O&M company and you take up all those orphan systems. I guarantee you will have more work than you can shake a stick at.
Although you'll be working for customers oftentimes that are very upset when they first contact you. So there's the challenge. But that said, I feel that there are some resources available to folks that are trying to make wise buying decisions. Ben, I totally agree with your assessment that there's far too many unethical people in this industry. And it's because it's contracting. There's a lot of unethical people in the window sales business and people that are out there doing bathroom remodels. There's contracting can be looked at as a easy license to steal. I'll reiterate, it's up to you, the consumer, to do your homework. And if you don't do your homework, well, you've got only yourself to blame, in my opinion. That said, there are really tremendously competent and ethical companies that are in this business. Obviously, being part of that Gigawatt family of companies, I look at the leadership of those companies as absolutely solid. I'm very close friends with Deep Patel, the founder of Go Green Solar, the CEO of Gigawatt, and he's a decent human being. He does it right, and he's done it right since I've known him. Greg is a ethical, responsible, decent human being. He's done it right since I've known him. These people exist. It's up to you to figure out how to find the competent, ethical people in our industry. One other resource that can help folks if you're looking to get a system installed by a contractor is NABCEP certification. Certainly is one way of validating professionals that have gone to that effort, not only of getting the experience and the education, but taking a very challenging exam akin, if you will, to a licensed contractor exam or a professional engineering exam to demonstrate that they have achieved a certain level of competency. So not every filter is perfect. I'll just say there are some good resources out there to help validate companies that are doing it right. And I think with educational resources that Gigawatt is trying to make available to the end consumer, judge it based on those merits. If you've got a company like Gigawatt that's trying to provide responsible education at no cost, give that some consideration in your buying decision.
Yeah, I think just how long has these companies been around for too? Like a lot of these solar companies pop up, try to make a quick buck, do things improperly and die off pretty quick. So, like the Gigawatt family, the Unbound / Wholesale Solar, the Alt E, and the Go Green have been around almost 20 years. I think each of those companies very close to 20 years. And so I think that says a lot about the integrity of those companies. They're not in this fast pace to make quick money. They're on a sustainable path. So I think before you have to go, Jeff, I want to kind of loop Greg into this conversation is like, your passion is about battery storage as well, especially with, the regulations or the lack of regulations, but this huge push, especially in California. And we talk about this flood of batteries coming into the market. And man, I've been talking to a lot of, people interested in doing battery backup solutions. And they always say, well, I got a battery. They say like, I got the Walrus or the EG4s or whatever. Right. And I'm just like, like that's great. But, what do you say about the current state of, battery storage and this huge flood of kind of brand new companies, not, when we look at more established companies like Enphase, Tesla, Fortress, Discover, Simplify, those have been around a long time, a lot of off-grid applications. With all these cheap options out there, why don't you speak to that in the UL listings and, You did a really good segment on what was that segment you did with
The Solar Builder magazine.
Solar Builder, yeah.
Yeah, I did a podcast with Chris Crowell, their editor there, about the dangers of using unlisted, unpermitted lithium batteries. So I'll just start with saying this. In life, I've learned over and over again, you get what you pay for. So if you're getting a very inexpensive battery, you should ask yourself, gee whiz, why is this battery so inexpensive? And I'll tell you oftentimes what will happen with those inexpensive batteries. Within a year or two, they won't work anymore. And is that a good deal? Holy mackerel, if you only get 1 year of usage out of a battery that's half the price, but the other competitive battery that might have been twice the price lasts 10 years, what's the good deal? And this is something that people aren't fully grasping. Not only might you end up with a useless brick that you spent thousands of dollars on, how do you get rid of that? I don't know of how you get rid of a lithium battery today. So I do feel buying quality over the long term is going to give you the lowest cost for your system over the long term. So there's a lot of value in researching what is the right product to get. So it's going to give you good long-term reliable performance. My solar system wasn't the cheapest. In the 12 years that I've had it since install, I've had zero problems with it. Zero problems. And at the time, Greg worked for the company that I got my inverter from, and it's been an absolute solid workhorse of a product. I was not at all unhappy that I paid a premium price for an inverter that's going to probably last me 20 or more years. I think that's something that the average consumer fails to grasp about this technology. So don't penny pinch when it comes to your equipment that you want to last for 10 or 15 or 20 years. You want to do your research. Put time and energy into your research. If all your research is talking to 2 or 3 salespeople that randomly show up at your door, I can assure you, you will likely make a mistake in your buying decision.
Well, what about these batteries that are guaranteed? So I think there's a little bit of a fallacy when they're saying like, oh, but it comes, and like I'll talk to these people like, well, it comes with a 10-year warranty. So they feel like they're protected.
Warranties mean zilch to me. After having worked in the solar industry, originally I had my first foray back in the 80s in the water heating days, but in the PV industry, when somebody says, oh, we've got a warranty of X number of years, I'm like, who cares? I don't care about warranties. I want to make sure that this company has a good product, that they've been around long enough, that they have good technical support, that they're ethical and honest. Research the salesperson's name on LinkedIn. If it doesn't come up on LinkedIn, are they legitimate?
I tell you, the warranty does not equal reliability. I talk about that also in my book. And one of the most, and speaking of, the inverter company, I have one of those inverters on my wall, and they're built like brick houses. Hang them and forget them. I've never had one issue, except when I got a new router, my inverter stopped reporting to the portal, and the company called me and said, hey, man, we haven't seen any data. I was like, wow, dude, that is so cool. Oh, yeah, I forgot to put the new password in. Boom, it was it. But one of the most profound things one of those German engineers told me when I worked for that company was this: price, reliability, efficiency. Pick 2. You can't get all 3. Yeah. And walking around RE Plus, a couple weeks ago in Anaheim, the big solar show, dude, there were more battery companies that I'd never even heard of. You couldn't even read their signs. And you're like, what do you got here? Oh, yeah, we're planning on launching this in Q4 of 2025. It's like, you got a 60 by 80 booth and you don't even have a real product. That's the stuff that's going to enter our market.
Let's talk about, before Jeff has to go, let's talk about the big ones. Let's first talk about Tesla's Powerwall 3. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think what we've seen, like the spec sheets look really great. I'm just kind of curious. It's not your, I think there's some nickel in there. What is the actual chemistry of that?
Well, currently they're using nickel manganese cobalt cells, although the rumors are that Tesla as a corporation for both electric vehicles and for the Powerwall, which are more of a secondary consideration to Tesla's corporation, that they will be gravitating towards lithium lithium iron phosphate. So LFP is the term that you hear. So I would say that Tesla and Enphase have impressed me of having products that have good reliability, good feature set, and especially Enphase has really good technical support. I do prioritize, quite honestly, in my advice to contractors and to end customers, that the technical support really does matter. So you want a company that's going to be there 5 years from now to help support your issue. That story Greg just mentioned, where his monitoring was no longer showing up online and he was proactively contacted by the manufacturer. That's the kind of service that in the long run you will really appreciate that you get from a premium product that you paid a little bit more for. So I think that the challenge is that you've got this lower tier of a lot of no-name battery companies that some of whom actually make a decent product and have legitimate people. It takes a little bit more study to understand if that's a good investment than some of these bigger companies. And I would say that we're probably for the next 5 years going to be seeing a pretty big revolving door of companies coming in and out of the business. So be prepared for that and recognize whatever you spend your hard-earned dollars on, you will be living with hopefully for 10 or more years of reliable service. So make sure that you choose the contractor or the seller in a way that you have confidence that they're going to be around 5 or 10 years from now to help you if a problem arises.
Yeah, Enphase is saying they have a 15-year warranty where Tesla says they have a 10-year. Do we know why? Is that kind of going back to the warranty, just feeling like, hey, we can look better?
Yeah, you can tell me you have a 20-year warranty, a 7-year warranty, a 50-year warranty. I disregard warranty talk entirely, personally.
Dude, and one of the big things, like these batteries only have so many cycles, right? And so a lithium battery in our industry, when it's end of life, that means the state of health or the amount of capacity remaining in the battery is at 80%. 80, right? That's what we consider. Now there's still, you can use that battery for longer than what the warranty says, but there's only so many cycles that thing can do. And generally speaking, the NMC battery only has about 2,000 or 2,500 cycles. LFP, generally speaking, gets around 6. So if you see a company that's saying, 10,000 cycles, 15,000 cycles, that's bullshit. You physically, that battery cannot give you more. So it comes down to marketing. It's just sales and marketing, and they're just dangling that carrot there with just these fake numbers to make you bite.
So I know some concerns people have with the Tesla Powerwall because they do use a different chemistry that might have more likeliness to have runway or whatever they call it. What's it called? Runaway? Thermal runaway. And is the Powerwall 3, is that using lithium ion phosphate, or is that still using?
Still NMC. Yeah. But here's my thing on that. Okay. The code makes no distinction about chemistry. Okay. It doesn't. It's 3 feet separation, UL 9540 alpha or not, right? So it doesn't matter if it's NMC or LFP. Okay. And frankly, and I know a guy who would tell people, if you get a Powerwall or any other battery with NMC, it will explode and burn your house down and burn your neighbor's house down. I'm like, whoa, man, that is not the message that we need to be sending. Okay. These things are safe. They're listed, they're tested, or they should be.
I have to go, but I have to throw a statistic out there. Tesla has manufactured 680,000 Powerwall units and does not have any evidence of a single one of those 680,000 plus Powerwall units going into thermal runaway. There's been others that have been involved in fires that were caused by other events, but that seems like a heck of a statistic. So Greg, I just think so highly of you, and I regret that I have to jump over to another meeting, but I would say part of the reason I bought my inverter was because of the advocacy and the work that Greg did while he worked for that manufacturer of the inverter. And I just love talking to you, man. I really do.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Just one more thing, Ben, about those batteries. you'll see some companies out there that will do like they call it a puncture test, a nail, right? So they just take a nail and they use a machine, obviously, because you don't want to be doing it with your hand, but they puncture an LFP cell and then another cell that's NMC. And the nail, when it punctures in the NMC, it's just a little mini explosion. It just burns and burns until there's nothing else to burn. But when they do the same test for LFP, it gets hot, but it doesn't catch on fire. And I worked for a company that used that type of marketing video. And I don't like that either, because again, it sends the wrong message. And I made my own video. I did my own test where I punctured an LFP cell and got it to catch on fire, just like the other one. I just used a different kind of nail. Yeah? So these things are very resilient. There are some extenuating circumstances that do cause these thermal events. And this lithium stuff is still kind of new, right? We're still trying to figure it out. So, we're implementing more safety precautions as the systems get bigger, right? Like, a 10 kilowatt hour system I had in my garage is completely different than a 2,000 megawatt hour system in a field in containers, right? Like, okay, that's a little more economy of scale. We should probably have, more and better safety features.
Yeah. Well, let's shift to the backside of your book, because you had something to say about, obviously you kind of you like the idea, especially from a, installer's perspective, like you look at microinverters versus the string tied, right? And though that's kind of separate from the battery thing, you did have a lot to say about it. And I kind of raised my eyebrows because I was kind of sold under the idea that, microinverters is a no-brainer because shade mitigation, lower points of failure, or having more, so if one inverter went off, your whole system wouldn't go off. Redundancy. And but when you actually look at the studies on the shade thing, it's like 5% or less, really, at the end of the day, with the technology and the panels and how they're built today.
Yeah, and the inverters, right? So I spent a lot of time on that, right? And I was at SMA when Enphase and Solar Edge came around, and I just felt very strongly in this book that I needed to address some of the stuff, and a lot of the, matter of fact, there's a whole missing chapter from my book that I didn't put in that goes into more detail than what I did in that last chapter, right? In the last chapter, I think I named it Extended Rant or something like that. Just stuff I wanted to get off my chest. And I actually took some stuff out because Justine Sanchez, again, she reviewed my book and she's like, yeah, this is really good. But this chapter here, like, doesn't really go with the rest of your book. And you just kind of sound like a curmudgeonly old fart. So you might want to take that out. And I did. But the thing that really gets me about any module level component, and in full disclosure, I work for a company right now that sells module level components. Okay? I do. So I have changed my view a little bit on how beneficial they are, but the underlying message of my book, I still retain and purport that, right? Like, there's mainly because there's so many myths and misconceptions. I just trained our service team this morning on the Christmas tree effect. It is one of the most repeated bullshit myths that our industry still holds on to, right? And you may not know this, depending on how old you are, but back in the day, the Christmas lights were all strung in series, right? They had those big Gumby glass bulbs on them. And if you broke one, the Christmas Story, right, with Chevy Chase, when has all those lights up there and he has to find that one bulb that is broken so the rest of the string will work. Well, people incorrectly apply that to a string of solar modules when they are not connected to an inverter. And you see a lot of videos, you see a lot of tests where people will have in their backyard, they have like 5 modules leaning up against a fence, and they have a clamp meter, they're taking measurements. See what happens when you shade a module? It's like, okay, well, yeah, but that's not what happens when those modules are connected to an inverter. The inverters are very, very smart. They have sophisticated maximum power point tracking algorithms. Some inverters have better tracking than others, right? They can get really sophisticated and actually do a sweep of the entire IV curve. I know I'm nerding out with a lot of terms, but we're kind of at the end. But the point is, shading one module of a string does not drag down the rest of the string. And in my book, I use 2 module of a power electronic manufacturer's marketing material to show that there's still, this myth is still out there. And then I show studies, I show even on my own YouTube channel, I do my own test, right, to show that Christmas tree effect is not correct. Okay, but that doesn't mean there's no value in those, right? They are easy, and they are so easy, right? There is redundancy. However, if one goes out, you have to go up on the roof to swap that out. And one of my axioms in my book is roof equals risk. You have to go up there to swap it out. And I hear installers, well, I don't swap them out until I have like 4 or 5 of them bad or more. Then I go up there. And I'm like, dude, that's kind of not cool, man. Like, those homeowners paid for those modules. They paid for that production. But you're going to wait until like 10% go bad before you go up there? Like, that's not all right. So there's a lot of pros and cons to them, just like with everything.
Well, I think that's going to kind of wrap it up for us, Greg.
Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about this stuff.